It's helpful sometimes to look back because the industry moves so fast. I think we pride ourselves sometimes on being pretty historically correct. So it's nice to go and look back, but this is major surgery, isn't it? That WPP is announcing. A really big shake-up. It's more than just some tweaking and rebranding. It's a big reorg. Hi, I'm Tom Denford and I'm in New York.
And I'm David Indo and I'm in London.
I spent a decade as a global executive for agencies like WPP, Omnicom and Publicis.
And I spent a decade as a senior marketeer managing media for powerful brands like Coca-Cola and Nike.
And 15 years ago, we came together to create IDComms, the world's first specialist media advisory and analytics consultancy. And today the company spans 14 time zones, and we serve dozens and dozens of iconic brands around the world.
This is our show Media Snack, where we share our bite-sized expert view on how procurement and marketing leaders are winning in media today.
We appreciate you tuning in, and we're excited to dive into today's show.
So Tom, last week WPP announced a restructuring of their organization and their agencies, and it's fairly significant news, not least to those people that are working at WPP, but also to the industry as large. Now, you may not remember, but a few years ago, we recorded a Media Snack episode, which was designed to provide the leadership at the time of WPP with a playbook to help them navigate the marketing challenges that they were invariably going to face. So I would love us to maybe have a look back at that episode and see how accurate and correct we were with our predictions.
So what we're about to have a look at is a previous episode of Media Snack that we called the WPP 2.0 Playbook. And it was recorded at the time, if you remember, when Martin Sorrell was exiting WPP and Mark Reed was coming in as the new CEO. He'd obviously been at WPP a long time before that. And we took the liberty to kind of give Mark some advice, like what would we do if we had the complete freedom of, and a giant scalpel, and recognizing some of the challenges, limitations, opportunities that existed to do a bit of a tidy up within WPP. What would we do? And that's where we started. So let's just look at, and we literally put our cards on the table. We did it in a very kind of old-fashioned way, and we put all the brands on the table, and then we just kind of thought about where they would exist. And we started, if we look back, we start with the creative side. So perhaps we can look at that first. Okay, so this is a very oversimplified version of WPP, obviously, and we've left out big chunks of the company, a number of very big companies already. But the principle is that it's not even organized like this, but we've just clustered it into some content, research, advertising, direct, technology, and media agencies, whatever they call them, organized under GroupM. Our brutal surgery, as we've just been talking about, would require us to cluster lines of business and talent.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the first thing we would probably do is take these
and unbundle them.
And unbundle them completely by selling them off.
Yes.
Okay. These are investments in content businesses and research businesses. So we would just remove those. So if you just take them off the table.
Yep.
Okay, they're gone. That's raised a lot of money.
Well, that was a fairly positive start to our predictions. Yep. That's exactly what Mark Reed did. And he unbundled that side of it. And his first major release of company from the WPP portfolio was Kantar. Yeah. He sold Kantar, I think, shortly after he got into the hot seat of WPP.
Yeah, exactly. And they've also continued to kind of divest in these content businesses. Not all of them have been sold entirely, but that's less of a focus that we've seen over time. So there's lots of other companies, as we said on this video, that are not represented on this table. We've just picked out some of the key brands, but that's definitely a kind of correct prediction, is that the focus was away from research and content. Okay, let's have a look about creative. Wonderman increasingly looking like one of the creative agencies. So these are the value-driven, strategic, consultative businesses, of which their business model is typically fee-based, and they're the ones that are competing perhaps more with the consultancies.
Yes.
Okay.
Or should be anyway.
Or should be.
So that's potentially a kind of a new division of the business.
What was interesting here is that the distinction we were making was around lines of business, right? And so what we were saying was that those kind of creative or consultative businesses, and I think we were right to put Wonderman underneath that at the time, even though it was very, very separate, to create what was the creative agencies there at the time. And then there's been further consolidation, right? Even beyond these iconic names that we thought we should keep.
I know. And now you're looking at just kind of two, right? Ogilvy and VML. Yeah. So these iconic creative powerhouses that Sorrell had spent fortunes acquiring under the WPP banner, and were very much the jewels in the crown of WPP, are now no longer.
All gone. But that's right. But those businesses still operate according to that line of business. They are fee-based, they are consultative, they're creative. Yeah. Exactly. So, okay, we're good so far. Let's carry on.
We've then got all the rest of these businesses, which are actually all quite different. And we've missed out lots of different data bits and pieces. Our brutal surgery is to take Essence and put it under here.
Yep.
Essence, whilst thought of as a media agency, has been recently made part of GroupM, actually is potentially just a different type of consultative agency. But we would leave the buying and the execution on that side of the table.
Okay, so that was wrong. That was totally wrong, obviously, because Essence, not only did it remain on the GroupM side, but it got folded into MediaCom, or they merged with MediaCom to create what was the largest media agency network at the time, which I'm surprised about.
Where we were right though, Tom, was that we'd identified Essence as the catalyst in change. So the challenger brand, if you like, within the media portfolio. And when Essence and MediaCom merged, I thought it was genius, absolutely genius, because what we do know from speaking to clients is that the biggest structural challenge that they all have is bridging performance marketing and brand marketing. Almost every organization that we speak to are struggling with that. And so if you believe the principle that a challenge that you can't fix internally, you outsource to your agency because they can compensate for your internal, internal problems, then that was the perfect solution. So you bring Essence, which is Google's agency, so beautiful performance, modern, progressive agency with the biggest offline buying agency in the world, MediaCom. You combine those two things, then you've got a ready-made, off-the-shelf solution that should, in theory, enable a client that has trouble bringing those two elements of its business together to compensate for it. Now, you could argue whether that in reality has actually happened, but I thought that was a really smart move.
Yeah, I think I differ on that, because I don't think that's been a success. I don't think that Essence has necessarily elevated MediaCom, or that MediaCom's necessarily elevated Essence. And as we'll come on to talk about, probably neither of them are going to survive long term anyway. I think that was a missed opportunity. It really felt like Essence was a different type of media proposition and a consulting business. It was the closest thing to a kind of comms consultancy, I think, for a technological age, primed for the world of automation and AI and biddable media and all those kind of things. Could have been. Maybe WPP feel they have that with AKQA or something. It's obviously a reason, and couldn't do that. Here, the brutal surgery was separating lines of business, and that would have been quite a lot. You're asking everyone in Essence who's not involved in execution to kind of stand up and move and go and sit somewhere else. And they've never really quite been able to merge cultures or people. Yeah. That's the big barrier to all of this. Is like, where do people sit? And that's a terrible way to organize a business often, but sometimes the easiest, I suppose. Okay, let's do some media surgery. Brutal media surgery. I think this was pretty provocative at the time.
We would take potentially all of these businesses actually and group them under one company. And that would mean actually getting rid of all of those brands. And what we could end up with here is GroupM focused wholly on the execution, and only then doing buying, data, and technology organized under one holding company.
That's right.
Okay, so this is super brutal,
This we got right, really. That's going to happen.
Yeah, we did. I mean, at the time, it was hugely provocative, closing down all the brands, all the networks, putting them behind a banner of GroupM, and then forcing them to sort of focus on buying data and technology that were at the service of the strategic elements, which were on the other lines of business. Yeah. Now, the one area that we didn't get correct was that GroupM actually is the one brand that is being sunsetted as part of this transformational change, and so all of the elements within the media portfolio of WPP will now be known as WPP Media. I know that you've got fairly strong views on the relative merits of that strategy.
I think that's a mistake. I mean, as this is proven, we advocate the simplification of the operations on that executional side. There's really no great reason to keep the agency brands. I'm sorry if you work for those agency brands. We want you to keep your job, but it's going to be under a different entity. But for GroupM to focus on buying data and tech, GroupM is the best brand in the world for that stuff. It is such a strange thing to be walking away. And I think the rebranding to WPP Media, in my view, satisfies the desire of Wall Street to have a very clear signal that WPP is in the media business in the way that Omnicom has done and Publicis have done, perhaps more clearly to investors. I can't see that WPP Media really helps them along with their customers, the advertisers, because GroupM is the most fearsome brand in media. But the structure, I think, is the right thing. Let's go on, because we do talk about kind of how they actually organize their resources now across those two different lines of business. We've got fee-based value businesses on one side and executional kind of transactional businesses on the other side.
But you would lose Mediacom, Maxis and Wavemaker completely as brands.
Yeah, and they would be fully integrated within the executional arm of WPP through GroupM.
Exactly right. So you have a very simple brand there with 3 responsibilities. That would be a much simpler organization to navigate as from different stakeholders. The big difference here is that we would take any talent that sits in any of those companies,
strategic talent, anybody
involved in the kind of analysis, strategy and planning, so all the planners in the media agencies, for example, would then go and sit within some of what we now regard as the consultative businesses. Because planning increasingly is paid for, should be paid for by fee.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to when we create separate lines of business here, we have the fee-based consultative businesses. So we move all the planners into these brands, and all the execution, the buying the data and technology, which can work on a commission-based business model, is a separate entity. You could still have WPP as the holding group of these two organizations, but you have clear separate leadership who set the principles for these businesses. So you've already got a very strong leader here in Kelly Clark, for example, and that would make sense, and you could organize CEOs of the different functions within that. And then there's I'm sure, a very good leader amongst all the businesses here.
That was a stretch, right? The organizing resource around lines of business, still think is the right thing to do, and agencies will do that. I think the way they're going to do it, unfortunately, though, is that those value add resources that currently sit in GroupM agencies are going to be surplus to requirements. So if there's going to be cuts in headcount across these agencies, it is going to be in some brilliant talent in insight, strategy, and planning. And they may get rehired on the other side of the business. But, I think if it was us, easier said than done, we would have intentionally migrated that. You'd have created some duplication on the left-hand side. You probably, you don't need 10 strategists in Ogilvy, right? But you do need some media thinking in Ogilvy.
Yeah.
So,
and you'd have naturally brought together content and media strategy, right? Which is something that we're seeing more and more of. There's more and more consolidation of businesses that are looking to find homes within the holding companies that bring both the content side of it and the media side of it. Here you go. You had a ready-made solution for that before advertisers even knew that they wanted it.
Yeah. So it's easy to see in hindsight, but we were saying this at the time. I think that's the right I still think that's the right business model. The media execution is a separate line of business. Okay. And as you've raised, the more that a company like GroupM or WPP Media gets into the business of pre-buying and reselling media inventory, which they call principal-based buying or inventory media, that side of the business turns more into a brokering of media. It's an arbitrage business model, and that's going to grow as a percentage of their income and certainly their profitability. When you're brokering media, when you're selling media, you don't need many planners, right? Because you're brokering media, you want to sell the media. But it'd been a really good idea to migrate that planning talent into the consultative side of the business, which I think is, well, we can see, the market can see, is not performing.
Absolutely right. And what clients want is smart, strategic consulting advice at a time when, the media landscape has never been more complicated, and every company's growth agenda depends on media being disproportionately more effective. That is what clients are asking for. Not necessarily a big buying unit. Yeah. That's the thing.
Okay. So what score would you give us out of 10 in terms of historically correct?
7.5, 8.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good. Obviously, I should acknowledge that AppNexus obviously was divested by GroupM, but they invested in their own other technologies subsequently. But we would have folded that investment under GroupM anyway, and which is where they are right now. I think pretty close. I'd give that a 7 or 8. We might do some more of these because we've made some wild predictions over time. Some I know we definitely got wrong, so we should probably readjust and balance it out. We should look how wrong we've been in other places. But this continues to be the direction of travel for agencies. You can see this happening in other agency groups. We've been looking at a lot of the Omnicom and IPG proposed merger through the same kind of lens. The lines of business are the same. The future business models are the same. The opportunities the same for Omnicom. We'll find further consolidation of agency brands. We've made some videos about what we think might happen to the Omnicom and IPG brands in future. Maybe we should put some literally cards on the table and do the same thing again. The same thing's been happening at Publicis. So at the same time, they're making good acquisitions though, aren't they? The companies. I mean, they're making some really important big bets and now have to integrate those things together. Yeah. Because I think our summary here is that WPP, it's good that they're doing this, but they could have done it 5 years ago, and they could have done it faster. I think smashing creative agencies together was the easy bit. It's taken way too long for them to figure out the media answer, and now they're playing catch up a little bit to the other groups. Okay, well, that was fun looking back. I think, you'll see in the show notes a link to the full episode of the WPP 2.0 playbook. So if you want to watch the full episode, I think it's about 20 minutes long, you can see and leave comments on that, how right or wrong you thought we were. Also, I think relative and related to this, there are, with such disruption going on in the media industry, not least with the Omnicom and IPG merger, we should link you to an episode that we did recently about how to navigate media chaos, because there's going to be so much change in the industry in the next couple of years. So have a look at that, and that gives you, we'll flash it on screen hopefully now, what we're calling the media merger matrix, which is basically a framework that we've developed with and for advertisers to help guide your decision making over the next 2 years. And you can watch that episode and figure out where you sit and what your best game plan is for the year ahead.
That's right. And if you are either planning, considering or activating a agency renegotiation in light of the chaos that's going on in the marketplace, then we also did a fairly insightful episode on the things that you need to consider when approaching a progressive, smart renegotiation with the agency. So that episode will also be in the show notes.
with David's play-by-play on a great agency renegotiation. And finally, this was quite fun to do. So if you've got other Media Snack episodes that you've enjoyed or you want us to look back on, please leave those in the comments below, and we'll try and do another kind of reaction video in the future. But that's it for this episode. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Media Snack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a positive review and remember to like and subscribe on YouTube.
And we love hearing your comments, so please don't be shy in the comments section below.
That's it for now. See you next time on Media Snack.